Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 14th of April 2022, and this is what we're going to discuss during the course of the show. We'll mainly discuss the briefing that was given by Major General Babar Iftikhar, who's the DG ISPR, which just ended a few moments back, in which he talked about a lot of important issues that concern Pakistan's foreign policy, as well as the recent incidents that have taken place in our country, including the change of the government. Now, a lot of important developments, of course, a lot of important details that he shared. He talked about the formations meeting as well, for formation commanders meeting as well. They discussed the current situation in the country as per the DG ISPR. They talked about the internal and external security of the country as well. Then he also said about that the army was ready to thwart any external or internal threat. To talk more about this briefing, we will be joined by Brigadier retired Nadir. He's a defense analyst. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, how important was this briefing by the DG ISPR in the current scenario?
This briefing by General Babar, DG ISPR, was very timely and apt. And you asked how important. I would say most important, because the whole nation, and not only the nation, the world across, are waiting to hear the exact version of the ISPR, which is the military spokesman for the Pakistan Armed Forces. So there is no discussion on its importance. That is one. And I would congratulate General Babar on this, though it's still continuing this question-answer session, that he was very succinct, that is clear and brief, and took on all the subjects, or most of the subjects, which were part of this, the entire milieu which is happening these days, or let's say the last couple of weeks, what has happened in Pakistan politically, from the point of view of diplomacy, from the point of view of national security, from the point of view of this hybrid war, this media war, this propaganda war which is going on against Pakistan. And so there is no question on that. It is very well conducted. Now I'd like to, besides commenting on that, basically I'd like to give my views, because I am chairman of Pakistan National Reform Movement, and I'm a soldier, scholar, reformer. So let me start with the first aspect. This was needed today, this briefing, and we should continue more with these in future, so that number one, the confusion prevailing in Pakistan politically, socially, psychologically should be dispelled or reduced. This first. And he has done it to a very, very great extent. And he also answered, as you can see, and he's still answering, I think, a host of questions from across the media spectrum, which is very good, because the people of Pakistan have a right to know the truth and a right to hear this version, which they are hearing, and it's a very heartening and a lively discourse, which is, and I'm sure you have heard it yourself also.
Yes,
coming to some of the aspects that I would like to highlight, and you can ask me anything you would like, but some of the things which I'd like to highlight and which have been covered by him, but I am giving you my views, because there is no point repeating what he said. Everybody's heard him, you see. First of all is the subject of foreign policy. I mean, we take it in one order. This because I've written on it. I recently wrote an article which is titled Pakistan Above All. We are Pakistanis, and everything aside, in the end, the first thing that matters to us is Pakistan, and everything else is below it. This is my view, and it's the view of all Pakistanis, regardless of all shades of opinions. So the first thing is foreign policy. This is my view as chairman of Pakistan National Reform Movement. I have written on it recently and previously also. We need a balanced foreign policy, and diplomacy is not something. And I'm not casting aspersions or referring to anyone. I'm talking in general, because this is in national interest, and which is done. The DG ISPR has done that. Is doing that right now. The foreign policy or the diplomacy is not conducted in jalsas or in public public meetings and through loose talk. One has to be very careful, because you're dealing with other states, other state actors, and there are so many things. And the Pakistani national interest has always been guarded. Pakistan has never compromised on its core national interests, like Kashmir, despite having a bigger enemy, India, like nuclear program, like Afghanistan. I have been writing on Afghanistan in my book, Geopolitics Pakistan, that the Americans and NATO should exit. And that was written when the Americans were occupying Afghanistan. And Pakistan made sure that peace prevails in Afghanistan. So I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just highlighting that Pakistan has, considering its resources, considering its challenges, Pakistan, and of course, the military institution doing its part, and the foreign office doing its part, and everybody. And of course, everyone makes mistakes, and everyone overcomes hurdles. That's part of national life. But coming to it that foreign policy is a delicate issue and it has to be handled as foreign policy and not something which can be like politicians exchange, their throw aspersions on each other. So that is one. And Pakistan's national interests have to be guarded. Equally related to it is national security. Right now, what is happening, so I come on to the point which was highlighted in this, not only by the DG ISPR General Babar, but in the question answers also, and I am wanting to speak on that. My view, actually, regardless of what shade of political opinion someone holds in Pakistan, and everybody has a right to have any political view, I mean, as long as it is within Pakistan or pro-Pakistan. As of now, enemies of Pakistan, I would say basically external, some people within, very small you may say, but basically external, are aiming, and this was highlighted recently in this talk, but I want to amplify it, are aiming to divide Pakistan. And if they could, I go to the extent they would want Pakistan to be made a Syria, because I wrote in my article that India can never defeat Pakistan, and India knows it, until Pakistanis were fighting Pakistanis. I mean, that is, so national security and is now threatened or is influenced by a weapon called media. Media is a weapon of war. Social media is a tool of war, and recently you've seen in Ukraine how effectively the Ukrainians and NATO.
Now, Brigadier Saab, I'd like to kind of interrupt you here and would like your input as far as the use of social media to create different narratives and even anti-Pakistan or anti-army narrative is concerned. We've heard also Major General Saab talk about the narrative and the army's narrative also, and the army's point of view also. They've also said that the army does not want to involve itself in politics as well, and he cleared that more than once. How do you feel, sir, should now the current government take the moves in order to thwart any attempts, whether it be on social media or media, to create a narrative against the government institutions or against the army?
Thank you for a very brilliant question, and I mean what I say. I'm very clear in my views and vocal, as you might notice. I totally agree that the current government, that is Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and of course the government that is being formed and all, it is their responsibility, of course the responsibility of the army, the media, myself, yourself, all Pakistan, to make sure that all efforts by anyone, that especially the enemies of Pakistan abroad and some misguided people within Pakistan, to wage propaganda war and especially use social media as a tool of war. I'm using this very deliberately as an instrument of war to sow divisions within Pakistan, to divide Pakistan and divide Pakistan army if they could, and divide all Pakistanis and make Pakistanis fight Pakistanis. That is what it means. We have to make sure at the government level, the federal governments, the provincial governments, at our educational level, and I am right now appealing to the youth of Pakistan through your August channel, that Pakistan is what matters. Your enemies, most of them are abroad. There are some misguided people in Pakistan also. And regardless of your political issues or views, that's all right. I mean, anyone can have any views. But Pakistan.
All right, there was also, your voice is a bit cut, so I'll go to my next question. The DG ISPR also said very clearly that there was no talk of any US bases in Pakistan, and he said that more than once. He said, and of course he also made this issue very clear. I think the call has been dropped, so we will continue our discussion till we get hold of Brigadier Retired Saab again, Nadir Mir Saab. In the meantime, let me just highlight some of the important points that the DG ISPR talked about. If we come to the political situation in the country that we've seen, the change in the government, the DG ISPR said that the establishment presented three options to the former Prime Minister Imran Khan: face no confidence, resign and call fresh elections, and dissolve the assemblies. He also said that the army does not want to involve itself into politics. There is no complaint of the army's involvement in politics, said the DG ISPR. He also talked about the story that was taken by the BBC's Urdu website, and he said that this story was ridiculous and misleading. When I was talking about Brigadier Secretary Saab about the use of or allowing the use of US bases in Pakistan. That was also refuted by the DG ISPR. He said the army would have disallowed the use of Pakistani bases, and he also said that the US never asked for bases in Pakistan. Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi Saab, former Defence Minister Secretary, joins us online. General Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. General Saab, I have heard Babar Iftikhar Saab in detail first give a briefing and then answer the questions by the different journalists. Now that the whole media brief has ended, whether it be local politics, the recent change in the government, or Pakistan's foreign policy, a lot was discussed during this media briefing. What do you feel was the most important point that you take out from this briefing?
I think it was a very comprehensive, thing, a very comprehensive briefing, and a lot of time was given for the question and answer session. Some of the salients which I can recount. First of all, he brought this point that this disinformation and misinformation, which probably started because of certain fissures within the country, but then got aggravated because of the enemy actions and because of people outside the country also they participated, non-Pakistani entities. So this was very important that he urged the media and urged the public that please do not give any credence to such fake news, misinformation, disinformation, whereby there's an effort to create a fissure or deepen the fissures between various political entities and also between the people of Pakistan and the armed forces of Pakistan. This is one. Then he also clarified very clearly that General Bajwa is not seeking extension, nor will he accept any extension. I think that was again something very important.
That puts to rest a lot of rumors that were circulating very recently, sir, isn't it?
Right, true. Third important thing was that he mentioned very clearly that whatever was the statement of National Security Committee, Pakistan Army subscribes to that, and nothing more or nothing less should be read, except for that statement which has come out, and we fully support that. And so many other things, which were related to civil-military relations, and of course he requested everyone that please keep army out of politics, do not drag us into any politics, and he also clarified certain things which were in the air about that army, suggested certain options to the ex-Prime Minister. He said no, it was not like that, and all those things. I think overall it was very comprehensive. It covered most of the apprehensions which were there lurching in the minds of many people.
Another apprehension, another very alarming thing that we've seen very recently is this anti-army stance that has been emanating, especially on the social media. That was also referred to by the DG ISPR during his briefing. And of course, he addressed the youth directly, in fact, to not give attention to all the rumors that are being spread, especially on the social media. And of course, they said people read and then they forward it without really assuming whether it's the truth or not. How important is for the youth and for the other members of Pakistan society to be more careful and be more responsible under the current circumstances?
I think if he has given a message, and I would also like to reiterate that and reinforce that the conflicts or the wars nowadays are not of tanks and guns and aeroplanes and ships. These wars are all about perception management, disinformation, misinformation, creating instability, internal instability, creating economic instability, creating rifts between various sections of the society, creating rifts between various institutions. And this is how many countries have been destroyed very recently in front of us. And I think that was the main focus of his, this briefing today. And I would also reinforce that and give the same message to our youth and to all those people who are, taking part in such maligning campaigns, that please stay away from it, and they must try to understand what are the objectives of the enemies who aggravate these things, who multiply these things. They only target, not only target the armed forces, they target the country as a whole. They create bitterness. They create a lot of hatred between various, factions of society. So we must be very careful about it.
All at Naeem Lodhi sahab, also the DG ISPR talked about his relationship with the different political parties, including the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and the current government as well. And he said that the army enjoys a good relationship with all the different parties. At the same time, we see a very different narrative when it comes to the social media. Do you feel there needs to be a proper understanding or maybe some kind of a measure taken by the current government, including the armed forces, maybe sit down and have a national security meeting on how to move ahead as far as social media campaigns that target the army or that target a rift between the army and the institutions is concerned?
I think that what you are suggesting is a good suggestion, and it should be done that way. But this was a big attempt from ISPR to alleviate all those things which are lurching in the minds of various people. So Army has again reiterated that we are apolitical, non-political, and we have to be with any government, whichever is a legitimate government brought in through, comes through legitimate processes. And he also, mentioned that Chief of Army Staff still enjoys good relations with Imran Khan Saab. So I think he has made things very clear. But I would also, second you that it would be good time that if the opposition, if there is any opposition, if it is not there, of course, inside the parliament, but outside Imran Khan Saab is there. So members of the opposition, members of the government and armed forces, if they can sit together and see that whatever is bad for the country, all parties, all entities, everybody should make sure that we do not give any credence to any misinformation, any disinformation, and there can be a sort of agreement that we should not do anything which hurts the country at large.
But on social media, Naeem Lodhi sahab, I'll come back to it because as far as targeting the army is also concerned, there have been fake messages, fake audio messages of armed forces officers that were being spread, and that has also been taken up by the DG ISPR during his media brief. What, in your point of view, should be done to thwart all such attempts? Because for a layman, for example, for an 18-year-old boy or a girl or a 17-year-old who is all charged with emotion and he listens to such fake news, he is going to be tempted to move to a certain side, to have a certain mindset. How can one thwart this?
Because I'm also a student of strategy, so I know one thing, that you need to know the nature of war, and you have to respond in the same area where the threat is emanating from. So if the threat is emanating from social media, the response also has to be on social media. If the response is physical and the threat is non-physical, then it doesn't work. So I think ISPR is aware of that, but we need to be more alert and more prompt in exposing all misinformation, disinformation, fake news. There should be minimum time delay between fake news and the rebuttal. I think all information ministry, our media, ISPR, other institutions related to communications, they will have to work faster than what is happening now, and they will have to respond faster. They will have to give the counter narrative immediately on a real-time basis. Only then this sort of warfare can be thwarted. In my opinion, there's no other way.
In that, I totally agree with you, sir. Kindly stay online. We've also been joined by Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan Saab. He's a senior analyst and a defense analyst as well. Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, what are the key takeaways as far as this very important media brief of the DG ISPR is concerned, in your point of view?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think this should now effectively put an end to all the fake news and all the disinformation that was being spread both from within Pakistan and probably assisted from outside. There was this fake news galore going on for the last many days, and the minds of the people were literally being hijacked, with fake news, and this was affecting the minds particularly of the younger generation. And I think every answer is there now in that briefing. And we hope that now, the ordinance on prevention of electronic crimes ordinance, which is the PACA ordinance, uh, it should now become more urgent to pass that once again, either through an ordinance, but preferably through the assembly. That ordinance was there in the Islamabad High Court, but I think that has been returned back to the government for reconsideration. And once that order, that PACA ordinance is accepted by everyone, thereafter, I think the Ministry of Information, PEMRA, PTA, and if needed, the intelligence agencies need to sit together and formulate a media security plan. And it also needs to be funded appropriately. Unless that is done, I think our digital domain will remain one of our most vulnerable flank of our national security and defense. And the enemies of Pakistan, whether they are inside Pakistan or abroad, they will take advantage of this.
You talked of enemies of Pakistan. So the DG ISPR also talked about the different operations that the army conducted during the year. He talked about terrorists that tried to disrupt peace in Balochistan and tribal areas. The armed forces killing 128 terrorists, arresting 270 others this year. 97 officers and Jawans sacrificed their lives for the motherland security. And 168 Jawans sacrificed their lives while on international duties. There is a lot of pressure externally also to destabilize Pakistan. How important do you feel now is the role of a cohesion between the armed forces, the establishment and the current government to thwart any such attempts?
Well, I think all internal as well as external threats, they have to be collectively faced by not only the armed forces of Pakistan, but the people of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, and all politicians across the political divide. Because when it comes to the security of Pakistan, that is closer and nearer to everyone, and this has been proved in the past during the Indian attacks at Balakot. But the 5G warfare through the use of social media is a different matter altogether. We are aware that right now, I think in Pakistan, more than 150 billion people, which is over half the population, they have access to mobile phones, and they have linkages, to WhatsApp, Facebook, and there, the enemies of Pakistan can generate, through automatic algorithms in a jiffy, millions of fake messages, which could be spread through the Facebook or through the WhatsApp
or WhatsApp or Twitter or so many other social media platforms, Raza Sahab.
So that has to be, that is the responsibility also of every citizen of Pakistan. And they should not spread or share these messages unless they are fully verified. There is also, a religious injunction on this, where the Holy Prophet has said that it is enough for a man to be a liar if he continues to spread every false news without investigating whether it is true or false. And it becomes the responsibility of the parents, the teachers in the academia, and I think every Pakistani to fight against this menace now of fake news. And once again, I would strongly say that, Pakistani media fraternity, the journalists and all that, they should support now the PACA ordinance so that people who are involved in spreading disinformation, they can be questioned, and the truth could come out, and Pakistan or institutions of Pakistan do not suffer.
Raza Mohammad Khan Sahab, there's a very important statement also that DG ISPR made in the wake of all the circumstances that have engulfed Pakistan in the last few weeks. He said democracy is directly linked with the strengthening of institutions. Then he said armed forces should not be linked with politics. And then he said there was no talk of martial law on the night of the 9th of April and that there will be no martial law in our country. How important are these statements to thwart these negative sentiments that have been emanating on social media, on different media platforms as well?
You see, when the armed forces officers are commissioned, then they take an oath of allegiance, and that oath has, four components, and it says that they are going to be faithful to Pakistan. They are going to be, they will uphold the Constitution of Pakistan and will be faithful to them. They will stay away from politics as much as they can, in fact, as far as they can, and that they will protect the country from internal and external enemies. So that is, part of what they have been taught. And therefore, I think if there were martial laws in the past, there were certain conditions, certain environments wherein it came. But I think right now, what has been said is absolutely true. That is good. That is in the national interest of Pakistan. It is also in the interest of all the institutions of Pakistan. It is in the interest of security and development of Pakistan, and that is the only way, the only form of governance, I think, that should now prevail in Pakistan.
Raza Saab, also when it comes to the relationship between the people of Pakistan and the army, we've all seen that the normal citizen, Pakistani citizen, loves the army, and it has been shown at more than one event or at one time, whether it be through the sentiments of the common man when we ask him questions about the Pakistan army, of how they defend our motherland. The DGISPR also said that the public support is a source of strength for the armed forces of Pakistan. Or at the same time, he said the people of Pakistan expect the army to keep away from politics, something that we've just discussed. When we see attempts to kind of strike a negative balance between the people of Pakistan and the armed forces, or the political parties and the armed forces, or the maligning of the armed forces in general, whose responsibility, in your point of view, is it foremost to work against all such elements or all such attempts?
You see, first of all, this is now, a contemporary phenomena that all over the world, I think all major political parties, they have their social media cells. The purpose of those cells is obviously, to influence as many people as they can to vote for their party, which is, I think, perfectly legitimate. But sometimes, these political cells have been blamed for, disinformation. And, that is what is, very concerning. It should be concerning for everyone. And, if that kind of activity continues, then I think there should be a check on that, because it would not go in the interest of political stability in the country, and it was also going to create misunderstanding between the institutions and the armed forces. Please also note that, in the garb of freedom of expression or freedom, of speech, many fake news also come in, not only in Pakistan, but also from abroad. We have seen that happening even in the United States and in Europe. But please remember that the Constitution of Pakistan has imposed limits on the freedom of expression, and it has very clearly been said that institutions like the judiciary and the armed forces, uh, there can be no negative aspersions cast on them, and I think there are punishments also indicated if that happens. This is not only there in Pakistan. It is there, I think, in many countries of the world, that the armed forces and the judiciary are given due respect, and nothing is said against them which could affect the morale of the armed forces, particularly the troops who are facing and fighting continuously in the very hostile environments, and they've been fighting against terrorists for the last 20 years, and against multiple enemies of Pakistan. So all these things, I think, need now, they need to be taken forward, and a national policy on the defense of our digital domain needs to be formulated, and it should be budgeted, I think, as much as we budget, any other defense of the country. Unless that is done, I think these fake news, they will continue, which will not augur well for the country.
I think all the sectors need to become very proactive as far as to counter any such attempts that have emanated in the last few weeks as well. My last question to you concerns the statement by the National Security Committee, which was also addressed by the DG ISPR during his brief. He said the statement did not contain the word conspiracy. Would you like to interpret what would be your interpretation of this statement of the DG ISPR as far as the statement of the National Security Committee is concerned?
I think what he also said is that that is a classified document, and if the government wants, they are empowered to declassify it, and it can be checked what exactly was said there. I also heard and read that he specifically said, when he was questioned whether the word conspiracy was part of that or not, so he replied that he thinks that it was not there. And I think we should leave it at that. And, if there is a requirement by the judiciary or by someone else to declassify that, to go into the details, that can be done at any stage that is needed.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this very important media briefing, something that was really being looked upon as far as the people of Pakistan are concerned, as to what was the narrative or the point of view of the army, of the armed forces, was in the wake of all that has emanated in the last few weeks. And the DGISPR, in a detailed media briefing, answered all the different questions that were put to him regarding the political situation, regarding what happened, regarding the apolitical nature of the army, regarding also the threats, regarding also social media, regarding all the questions that the people of Pakistan had. And I think the answers couldn't have been more clear. Omar, Khalid bids you farewell from this special episode of Newsroom, in which we've talked about the media brief of the DG ISPR, Major General Babar Iftikhar. We'll be back tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to you, us in Pakistan. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay informed. Allah Hafiz.